everybody. Welcome to the Mud and Rib Podcast. We are about love, life, and leadership. And today we are going to be talking about a hot topic. It's going to be about boundaries with in-laws.
The Outlaws. That sounds exciting.
This could be a really sensitive topic in all seriousness, even though I know we're making jokes. In all seriousness, we want this podcast to be both for the listener who is the in-law and the kids of the what am I trying to say?
I'm an outlaw, an in-law. Yes, for those who are dealing with in-laws and those who are in-laws. There you go.
There you go. I don't know. Maybe I need to go back to bed and start over again.
Maybe so. I'm just glad to be risen from the dead since I was sick as a dog for 5 days after coming back from Indonesia. So
yes, we're glad. I think I'm glad you're back.
Yeah,
Guy's in rare form, so I just told him I think he needs to go back to being sick.
Yeah, she was like wishing me to be dead again. That's just inappropriate.
Not dead, just not quite as hyper. Him and our dog Cash are both hyper together.
Okay, let's go.
Okay, so what we want to do is I started thinking about this whole idea around struggling or navigating what it means to you engage in a relationship, you get married, and now you've got to navigate what it means to have relationships with both your families and together.
Right.
And so maybe we should start by talking about I think the way I thought of it is 3 categories, because we can't address everything on this podcast, but I feel like there are kind of 3 categories that you might put your situation in. And one is just your normal learning how to be married and navigate that relationship, both for the people for your parents and for you who just got married. It's difficult for both.
So one of the things that we always say when we're coaching those in premarital coaching that are getting prepared to basically to say their vows and commit to life to one another, we say, listen, you are marrying into families. And so that's important for you to be aware of that your families matter. Good or bad, you're going to have to learn to deal with that.
Yes. So the 3 categories, just to make sure we stay on that, is normal, just learning to transition. And then the second category would be a little more serious. You need to have some more strong boundaries because things are fairly intrusive and not allowing you to be your own family. That would be a little more like category 2. And then category 3 would be not good. Like it goes beyond normal transitioning into your children being married and becoming adults.
So
are you
do
laughing?
You mean I thought you were going to talk about the psychotoxic relationships?
Well, I was going to say psycho, but I was trying to be kind. But we do have some parents that really struggle to the point of it not being normal transition to adulthood.
Sure.
And so those are the 3 categories that we're going to be talking about today. And so we did a poll. We took a poll on Facebook, and I had a lot of really just great comments on there about things people have navigated or walking through, and then some that were a lot more extensive that I received private messages about. And it just shows that this was originally going to be just a topic about boundaries.
Right.
But it's ended up the boundaries with in-laws is a really hot topic and something that people are struggling to navigate.
So we received a lot of feedback on this.
So we received a lot of feedback, yes. And we have our own, we have, in all honesty, this is not just blowing smoke. I mean, I've had great in-laws as far as, for the most part, there's not been a lot with your dad, your mom, that has been relatively smooth, I feel like. The only things Guy's mom has really ever done to me, and she would probably laugh if she listened to this, but I know she's not, is that she likes to move my furniture.
That one was
uninvited.
That was crazy.
So let me just say that is not being a good in-law to go into your daughter-in-law's house while they're on a trip and just rearrange not just furniture, but like dishes and everything when I had a system for how it works. So I will just say we've had that.
That just shows you that there's all kinds of things like that you can get involved in relationships with in-laws and family, etc.
Yeah, the list is long of things that could go wrong. And so I think that I want to start by saying that, we, like we said in the beginning, we are in-laws. So we have navigated what it means to send your daughter off to be married and to have to transition and let them be their own family. And there are things about that are not easy as a parent. And I will say that one of the things that I think is really important in this is remembering and always thinking about what is it like to be the other person. I think when you're talking about just normal transition, as a mother, I've given my whole physical body 9 months of carrying a baby, it's really almost 10 when you get down to it. And then raising my daughters and our son, but raising them up to then hand them off to someone else. And then the struggle of I'm no longer most important in their life. And that is a real thing. So being sensitive to your in-laws or to your own parents about what that must be like for them, but also not carrying that, not picking that up and making it your own, but just being aware. But also being aware as in-laws, what is it like for your daughter or your son to engage in a relationship and be trying to pioneer and carve out their own path and family, and what it was like for you when you were trying to merge your own family?
Yeah, Psalms 127, I believe, has been a huge encouragement for me in regards to raising our own children, is that our children are like arrows and they're to be aimed and released to have an impact. And part of that releasing, it would be helpful for us as parents to just prepare ourselves for releasing them into their own life and into their own mission and into their own purpose, and how important that is for me to let go and allow them to develop. I know it's hard, but part of it is I have a limited time to shape them, but I am preparing them for something. And if I intentionally craft and shape these arrows to have an impact upon the world, and I have to at some point launch, release them, whatever word you want to use, for them to have that impact, and then it's no longer my responsibility. They have to take responsibility for themselves.
So do I hear you saying that as our children become adults,
Yes,
that there are small ways that we need to begin to release them already before they even get to the
Absolutely.
place of marriage?
yes. And hopefully, that our kids would recognize that as they get older, that mom and dad do know some things and would be able to come back to us and ask us for counsel and help as they navigate things. But my desire is not to control them or to live their life for them, but I have released them, and I can certainly help them through certain stages and experiences of life because I've experienced a lot more life. And so I can become like a mentor and a coach to them if they so allow, but they have to choose that. And they have to be willing to come and say, hey, Dad, what do you think about this? Dad, can you help me? Dad, can you fix this particular thing? Usually I get all the questions about how do you repair this or repair that?
Right.
So, but I have no problem with that. That's cool. That's what I'm here for.
And in reality, not all parents are parents that you should be seeking advice from. Is that true?
That's correct.
Yeah. Yeah. Which that makes things more complicated when your parents are not people that you really feel, maybe you're not aligned biblically on, maybe your parents don't follow Jesus and you do. And so you do have to be sure that the people that you're asking for advice for your family align with what you believe biblically.
Sure.
So maybe before we get into kind of a lot of scenarios that could happen or that we've been told that have happened, and maybe what are some possible ways to approach that, let's talk about the things that we absolutely know. What are the things that we do know from the scriptures about this situation?
Well, again, you have the principle of aiming and releasing, but then you also have the principle of when a man and a woman commit to each other and covenant to become one, and they become one, the responsibility is to leave and cleave, meaning that is their family now. We are, yes, a part of an extended family, but our sons and daughters or those that are in those relationships, we are to encourage them to basically develop their own family and develop even some of their own traditions. Certainly we'd like for them to take on traditions that we've handed down, and some of them would be wise to follow if they're good models and examples, which we talked about that around the Christmas time. So to me, that's real key, is that our children, when they get married, are to come together and form their own family. And it's not my job to try to control them. I have to release them and even encourage them to do that. and to not get in the middle of it and constantly challenge them to develop and grow in the covenant relationship that they've committed to.
Yeah, one example of that, and I don't think my daughter would mind me sharing this, at least let's hope not, because I'm about to say it, is that when our daughter first got married, in some ways we had such a close relationship that she would often come to me and say, well, what do you think about this? And I would say, well, what does your husband think about this? And that was my way of saying, like, it's okay for me to give input, but I want to know that you've talked to him first before you come to me and ask me what I think. And I want to know what he thinks before I say anything, because I don't want to get in the middle of what the two of you are trying to talk about. And we have to remember, as parents, we don't always know both sides of the story. And so we're going to side with our kids. And so it's very important that we are constantly pushing our kids back to one another and them working it out as much as possible. Certainly giving guidance when it's necessary. But in this example, our daughter was just used to coming to us with everything. And so she had to start training herself to go to her husband first.
Yeah. So we want to be on the truth side and constantly point our kids back to the truth that they need to live out together and in their covenant relationship with one another.
So what else? What is, a lot of times I think this becomes difficult to navigate, because if we're really wanting to follow God, we know that the Bible says we should honor our parents. And so what does it really mean to honor our parents? And especially when it comes to our relationship with one another.
Yeah, I think there's some confusion around what it means to honor our parents. And, there's cultural, there's family stuff, that a lot of past perceptions of what it really means to honor. One of the interpretations that I like about this whole idea of honoring your parents comes from the 10 Commandments. Of course, this is the 10th commandment, but that the commandments are in 2 tablets and they're actually parallel and connected. So 1 is connected to 6, 2 is connected to 7, 3 is connected to 8, 4 is connected to 9, and 5 is connected to 10. That there's parallel connections when they're side by side. And do you know what the 5th one is?
No.
The 5th commandment is do not covet. So what does coveting mean?
Like wanting something that's something else.
Yeah, wanting
other than
something.
what you
Yeah,
have.
so wanting something other than what you have. And so one of the core principles around do not covet is basically wanting parents other than the parents that you have, and not honoring them by, these are the parents that God gave me. God sovereignly gave me these parents. And whether the parents were good or whether the parents are bad, we can still honor them, because even from a bad model, you can learn what not to do.
Yes.
And it can help you do what you should do differently. And so God can sovereignly use bad parents to help you do good things and to do the right things for the right reasons, no matter the results, because Jesus is enough. And so I think that's a powerful understanding of what it means to honor your parents, is to thank God for the parents that he gave you, and to be thankful for that. And again, whether it's good or bad, be thankful for the parents that he's given you.
So that doesn't mean that, if your parents abused you, that you're saying that's okay or anything like that. It's just
Not at
saying,
all.
God gave me this family. I'm going to be thankful for it.
Yep.
The things that I can learn from it, and I'm going to move from here.
That's exactly right.
I think that's really good, because in this culture, there's so much trauma talk and so much just, I wish that I had something different than what I have. And I think it can get really tricky when we start really leaning into that type of thinking, where everything is trauma and everything is covenanting something that we don't have. Then we can really get bogged down in not being able to move forward with what we do have.
Yes. And I mean, they're just a lot of twisted and particularly in shame cultures where you still have to do everything your parents say, when it's like, no, I actually am at a place where I have to trust God and obey him with my family and do what's best for my family.
Even if you don't like it.
That's exactly right.
And I think that's one thing I want to talk about, the culture part of this.
Yes.
When it comes to, this is not so much about you having boundaries with your parents specifically, but I think it's really important. A lot of times people will say, this is my culture, especially if you have an interracial marriage.
Yes.
Or different ethnic, just any type of cultural background that's different.
Yep.
And the truth is, we all have culture.
Yes.
Whether it's the culture of what color your skin is, to how you were raised religiously, or all types of culture. But at the end of the day, if you are a follower of Jesus, then the Bible trumps culture.
Yes.
Every time.
Yep.
And so by all means, there's nothing wrong with bringing certain things about your culture into your new marriage. But if that is affecting your marriage in a way that is not lined up with the Bible, then the Bible needs to trump culture.
Yeah. We want to have our mind renewed and transformed and align our life with the Word of God. And that's super important in this process. And so you could come from a culture that, you always do what your father said down through whatever generations, and you don't listen to your husband. That's not good.
Right.
Or there are cultures where mom is almost exalted to a value above your wife. And I'm like, you're not married to your mom. You're married to your wife. And that's who you're supposed to be in covenant with, not your mom.
Right.
And so again, the way you honor your mom is be thankful for her, but mama needs to get out your stuff. And that's a reality that you and your wife need to be connected and one. And that's important. And hopefully mom will come to a place where she can honor and value that herself. Be thankful for the wife that you chose and learn how to deal with it.
Let's kind of get into some of the nitty gritty about what are some of the things people wrestle with. And there's so many, y'all. I mean, we got a lot of things that I could not begin to go over all the things, but some of the common ones, one was holidays.
Yes.
Like when you first get married, how are you going to handle holidays, and how do you need to have these conversations?
We should talk about how we handled that ourselves, because that's an issue. That was an issue for us.
Yeah, that was really hard. So for us, the first time I ever told my mother that we were not going to be with her on Christmas Eve, that we would come the weekend before that to spend Christmas with her, you would have thought I shot her dog. I mean, it was not good. And because I was so used to her being the voice in my life, I got off the phone just in tears thinking I was crushing my mom and we've got to change everything to accommodate her. And God was like,
No,
we're not doing that.
We're not doing that.
And so what I want to say is that, and I've said this in a previous podcast, is sometimes things do get worse before they get better. And you have to be okay with that and be solid in the boundary that you have set up. And it wasn't that we got into a fight with my mom, but I just later, when it wasn't in the heat of the moment, just talked to her and said, listen, I know that this is what you're used to, but this is the life that we have. And this is what we are going to need to do moving forward. So in order for us to enjoy our time that we do get together, then we're going to have to come the weekend before Christmas. And so I just left it at that. And the first year, there was a few snide comments when we were together. But after that, it really got better, and she knew what to expect because I was clear about what we were going to do. And I didn't back down on that. And I didn't give in to, I'm sure I probably went and cried for a minute when she was ugly to me, but she got over it and we got over it. So thankfully, but I know that's not the case with everybody. I know that is not that simple for everybody, but we have to stick to whatever our boundary is going to be.
Yeah. And we don't want to use boundaries to support our own selfishness or even unfairness. I mean, it's good to rotate. I know couples who have agreed to rotate through holidays, and so we have some of that with our own kids. Our kids, they come, the grandkids, we get to see the grandkids on Thanksgiving one year, Christmas the next, and we just rotate back and forth between my daughter's in-laws. And that's a good boundary and fair. So we don't have a problem with that.
And was it hard the first year? Absolutely. It was hard the first year not having one set of our kids here, but that's the way it is. That's life.
Yep.
And so we have to be okay with that.
I think that's just the challenge of it's as you're younger, you don't think about it, but as you get older, there's a lot of deaths you have to die along the way to let stuff go. And that's all just part of it. And we're all going to eventually die one day, ultimately, from our time here on this earth as it is right now. And so it's good for us to learn to let go of things along the way, but it's challenging.
Yes. Some of the other comments that I received was around religion, like, maybe your parent, maybe you grew up Catholic and now you are not a part of the Catholic Church and you're going to more of a non-denominational or church. And so, parents certainly want their kids to grow up often and follow in their footsteps as far as the same religious beliefs. And so that was one, or a number of that we've received. Some were, some examples we have go as far as, manipulation, trying to control,
treating poorly,
literally saying like your husband could have had anyone else,
yes,
as though you're not good enough. It could be just things like your in-laws or your mother-in-law or father-in-law, and that in some cases showing up at your door. Maybe you live near your in-laws and they come over at times that you really don't want them to be there. And it doesn't mean you don't love them. It's just not a good time. And so what we want to talk about as we kind of like move toward the end of this is, what do you do with that? And so I think this goes back a little bit to what we talked about in one of the other episodes about communication, about assertive communication. Mm-hmm. And I was listening to a podcast the other day about this, and I really like this, is when we set boundaries, we need to lead with empathy. We need to lead with love. And so whenever there is a situation, and I'll use the kids, your in-laws showing up at your door unannounced, what I really loved in this example was, to the mother-in-law, I really love that you want to spend time with the grandkids and they love you. And that's leading with empathy and love and understanding. Like, I love that you want to be with your grandkids. However, when you come without me knowing you're coming, we have homeschooling or we have certain things planned, and it's really difficult for us to get back on track. So in the future, it would be good. I need you. I wouldn't even say it's good. I need you to let me know ahead of time that you'd like to come, and let it be a time that is good for everybody so that you get quality time with the grandkids.
Yeah.
And so what did you hear in that communication?
Well, I mean, one, you're taking responsibility for clearly communicating. Up front, you're empathizing, which is very important. I mean, that's even important in the discipline of our kids. There's times where we just need to say, I understand that that's difficult. Here's what you need to do. So I heard clear communication in that. Empathy and clearly communicating the boundary and asking them, will they do that?
And so I think that then if you get pushback about that, then you have to be able to say, I certainly understand this being difficult, but this is the boundary that we have, and we're going to have to stick to this. And I think you have the main thing I want people to take away from this is, if you you must set boundaries. Everybody needs to, whether it's, sometimes you can easily, boundaries can be set without saying too much just by your actions, but if they're done in a loving and gracious way. But a lot of times we just need to communicate clearly, and everything doesn't have to be an overblown, this is a boundary, and we don't have to use those words.
Right.
But sometimes you do have to clearly use those words. If it's more of a, for lack of a better word, a toxic relationship, you might have to actually use, no, these are the boundaries we're setting for our family, and we are going to stick to these. And I'm sorry if you don't like that, but this is what we must do. It's important to be clear about our boundaries and to communicate that to the other party. And like I said before, we don't always have to use the word boundary. It may just be a daughter sitting down with her mom and saying, Mom, I know you love us, but it's not the best for you to always have an opinion about my husband, because we're trying to develop our life together, and you need to let us have room and for me to form my own opinion. I just think a lot of this comes back to communication and learning how to communicate with others, the hard things. I think sometimes what we do is we run from hard conversations. And so instead we have all this internal conflict in our families, and it's never been addressed. And so, you always hear about these ghosts in the closet of things that have just never been communicated. And I don't want that for us. Like, I don't want that for our audience. I don't want that for us. I want there to be clear communication about what it is what is really the problem, what are the good things about that person, and how can I clearly communicate what the boundary is.
Yeah. And so you're saying that the difficulty of the communication and even setting the boundaries is worth the results that will happen over time if you stick to the boundaries. And that's important. And you honestly may have parents that don't care for or like your spouse, and they think they're right about that. And I'll remind you as a parent that it's not your role, if you're a follower of Christ, to be right, but to be redemptive. And that is your son's or daughter's choice. And that's their choice. and you're going to have to stick with it. And one of the most dangerous things you can do is try to get in the middle of it and speak negativity of it and even possibly try to destroy it. That's dangerous ground for us to walk on as parents. So allow your kids to experience the consequences of their own decisions. Even if it was a bad one, they're going to have to experience that. And you and I speaking into it negatively is not helpful.
And sometimes it wasn't a bad decision. You just don't have a preference for them. And you have two choices. You can either choose to engage and love well in that relationship and just let that go, or you can choose, if your children have good boundaries, to not be a part of their family.
Yeah, and I understand some of our kids have made very, very poor decisions, and they could enter into toxic or even harmful relationships. And there are times to step in when things are beyond a certain level where it becomes harmful to them. There are times where you need to step in. So we, again, are not talking about those times. We're talking about a parent who believes that this is a bad decision is going to voice it to them. And it could very well be, but I'm just telling you, it's better to stay out of it and allow your kids to wrestle with their own decisions and their own relationships instead of you trying to always intervene.
Yeah. So I think we made it clear in the beginning, we just can't address all the different levels. That's why I felt like the 3 categories was important, because some are just normal transitions into adulthood and into marriage and just finding your way, navigating that and having just gentle conversations. The second would be more firm discussions, leading with empathy, clearly communicating what your boundary is and what you need from them, and in the positive outcome that can come from that. And then the third is, it's a lot more toxic and that needs more attention than just having a simple boundary. Maybe then you do need counseling and coaching on what would be some ways to navigate this. Maybe you do need someone to be a mediator when it comes to your family. Then you may need, your spouse to even step in talking with your family. And it's not just you, it's the two of you together.
Yeah, and there is a toxic level where you just may have to remove yourself from this relationship, or there are things that you're going to have to stand upon that can be pretty tough and hard, but it's better for you and your family to not have that relationship if it's really that damaging.
Right. One of the things before we kind of close out that I want to ask is, so let's just say that, for example, you have a problem with my dad and you keep saying to me, would you talk to your dad about this, whatever your problem is? Where is it appropriate for there to be a go-between like that? And where would it be appropriate for you to then just you address it with my father?
That is a challenging question. I mean, I would think that most of the time in that setting, for me, I would want to take the responsibility to talk to the dad almost 100% of the time. But I'm sure there could be some situations that it may be better, that there are times to have a mediator. But I honestly don't know how to answer that question.
Without it, there's a lot of scenarios.
Yes, exactly. Without knowing the scenario of what to do. I think for me, I always want to take the initiative to have the conversation, and I certainly don't want to send anyone, especially my wife, in relationships to do the communicating for me or the mediating, unless it's us together. So
yeah, and I think the point that I want to make is that, it can be a lot of pressure if you're the one who has the problem and maybe I don't see whatever you see as the problem, not to put the pressure on your spouse to deal with it for you. And I think that, so if it's something that maybe we don't both see that it's a problem, then you have to take responsibility. If we both see it's a problem, it's probably okay if I talk to my dad because I'm closer to him, but not putting pressure on your spouse to deal with something alone when it's us together. There are times for it to be us together communicating. Sometimes it's individually, sometimes it's together. And so we need to make sure that we're not putting unnecessary expectations or pressure on our spouse about their family that we're not willing to do together.
Yeah, and one of the things I think that's important in a marriage, particularly a husband and wife, is for you to believe in your spouse, particularly a husband to wife, that she's more than capable of communicating, of standing, and it may be appropriate, absolutely, for me to step in again if something becomes harmful or absolutely poor, something has been transgressed or violated in such a way where I do need to stand in. But there are many, many situations where you're more than capable of communicating how you feel, what you think, and dealing with confrontation. And I think that's important. And I think that really does lift. We can lift one another up kind of side by saying, you are capable of dealing with the stuff you need to deal with. This kind of goes in to one of the principles we talk about. Each one of us has a backpack that we have to carry. And there's certainly bigger burdens that we need to do together, but there are individual responsibilities. And the danger is one partner or the other carrying stuff that each of us should carry ourselves, and not taking on responsibility that should be taken on by your spouse, if that makes sense. I mean, each of us has responsibilities like fertilizer, and I don't want to take stuff that you should be responsible for and take responsibility for it.
Yeah, to me, an example of that might be if there is an issue that I had with my mother, but I want you to take care of it for me.
Yeah, no.
That's not going to work.
Right.
I mean, that just doesn't work. I need to be mature enough to deal with that and figure out how to have the hard conversation with my mother and not put that on you. That would be an example. I have to carry my own backpack. But if I've had a conversation with my mother and now she's blaming you or saying you're the reason that I'm having this boundary or whatever, then it probably needs to be a conversation that we both have together where she's now having to confront both of us. And I think would be an example of that.
That's a pretty good example.
So I think, there's so many things that we could talk about with this, but I think if we leave this conversation with anything, I think it goes back to the first session we had about communication, whether it be in your marriage or with other people. We must learn to communicate. And in this culture, it's so easy to just want to write something, type something, or avoid. I feel like those are kind of like our go-tos. Some people want to blow up. And so that's also not clear communication. Right. So I think we really need to get to a place where we stop being afraid that everything we say to our parents is dishonoring them. It's not a dishonor to honor your spouse by trying to become one and be united. And it's not dishonoring to your parents to tell them the truth. We have to be okay with that. And so I think this whole voice of don't dishonor your parents can really cause us to avoid conflict that we absolutely need to engage. And it doesn't all have to be conflict. I think sometimes we build up in our mind that things are going to be conflict, but if we communicate them well, maybe you do need to write it out before you talk to them about what you want to say so that you've clearly addressed in your mind, how can I be empathetic? What are the things I need to think about my mother-in-law or my mother or whoever it is that are good in this situation? What is it that I am actually trying to say? What is the boundary that I need in this situation? And how do I want to, what I like to call dismount? Like, how do you want to close that out with? Because by saying, if we can do it this way, things will be a lot better for everybody. How can this be a win-win? These are some of the languages you can use. How's it a win-win? How can, this will be better for everybody. The kids get more time with you. It'll help our relationship be better. So I think you have to think of those three categories or those three areas in the communication, and just don't be afraid to start doing this. And even if you mess up, you've got to be willing to come back and say, that conversation did not go the way I wanted it to. Can we try this again? This is what I'm trying to say. But we have to start doing this. And I think we're going to have better, I believe wholeheartedly, not all the time, but in your average just transitioning to marriage, you will have better families for it.
Yeah. So I hear you saying that the risk is worth it, that we need to work on the assertive and active listening, right?
Yes, assertive communication and active listening.
Assertive communication, active listening. And we need to know what we are going to say yes to and what we're going to say no to. And so we encourage people to learn what it means to be a follower of Jesus, means knowing what we're going to say yes to and what we're going to say no to. Yeah, you can have personal preferences, and there are areas where you can have personal preferences, but we also need to make sure that what we're doing is living out biblical principles, and that our boundaries in our life is built upon Jesus Christ and who he's asked us to be and how he's asked us to live.
That's right. And one of those may be compromise. We may need to say,
Sure.
you want us to come over to your house every Sunday, but that really makes it hard for us with kids on a Sunday. How about we meet halfway? Just something where we're trying to find ways that we can compromise, not give up what we think is a good boundary for us, but that can be, when you can compromise. But if that's not going to work, then you need to have a clear, defined boundary.
Yeah, learn to serve, and that's real important. Some of us need to learn to serve, and then some of us are self-inflicted martyrs that can't say no.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think we need to make sure being self-aware is important in this process. I think, and that we will talk about that on and on and on, as they say, till the cows come home. So I think that's pretty important.
So thanks for listening to the podcast today. This will be the end of our marriage series. And so we are really grateful that you've been with us. We hope that you will continue joining us for the podcast. If you like the show, if you would subscribe, we really appreciate the reviews that have been coming in. If you would continue to do that, we would be grateful so people can find the show. And so thanks for joining us, and we look forward to next time.
Absolutely. God bless you.